the actual start time, so hopefully we can get you guys out of here early. I don't think this session will take the entire time, but we will see. One quick note, if you have your computer and you want to join, this is a Pear Deck presentation. For those of you who haven't used Pear Deck, it's available as a Google Slides plugin or standalone. Great tool for interactive feedback during sessions. So it has on a couple slides with interactive elements built in. So to join, you can do it on any device, but peardeck.com/join. DZYBT will appear on all of the slides. We'll wait a couple of minutes for people to finish coming in. Real quick, just so we get a sense of the audience, how many of you are tech directors or similar role? IT systems, other IT roles? Okay, a couple. People who are not involved in IT at all? Okay, so largely IT-focused crowd, which is probably appropriate given our topic. Quick introduction. So I'm Adam Kurth. I'm Director of Technology and Innovation at the Iowa City Schools. This is my second year with Iowa City. We have a pretty large environment in the district, a little over 14,000 students, about 2,600 staff members. So automation for us becomes critical. We cannot do things manually. That said, at the start of the year last year, we were doing things manually. And we'll talk about that in some detail in our transition, how we got to where we are today.
I'm Justin Miller. I'm the Technical Operations Manager for Iowa City Schools, also my second year. So we're both kind of new folks there, trying to get a handle on a bunch of legacy systems. We wanted to automate, integrate a bunch of other systems to do things smarter and faster.
Cool. So, as you know, our topic is going to be automation. For those of you who joined the Pear Deck, and hopefully that's some of you, and if not, that's fine too, but for those of you who joined the Pear Deck presentation, on a scale of 1 to 10, just enter a number somewhere in that range, with 1 being none, 10 being complete. How would you describe your school or district's level of user account automation right at the moment? You had to give a number. All right. We're seeing some responses appear. Looks like we're pretty good. We have some people up around 7.5, a couple of districts there, a couple of districts right at 5. We have somebody who's indicating a 1 or something similar to a 1, down at the level of almost no automation at all. Justin and I were talking about this before the presentation. We kind of feel like going into last year, we were kind of at a 5. There were certain things we automated, for instance, connection between our LDAP Active Directory and Google, for instance, and Office 365. Inexplicably, we use both. Those were things that were automated. We weren't doing all of that manually, but in terms of user account creation, a lot of curricular systems, that sort of thing, it was still manual. We were doing things, as we got them in. So, kind of what I expected. It's cool that we have a district that's up around 8, another one who looks like they're right at about 7. So we have some people who are feeling pretty good, some people who are not feeling quite so good. Hopefully this will help apply to all of these. So, hey, this one.
So just a little bit about our district. Like Adam said, 14,000 plus kids, 2,600 staff, 30 plus buildings. We're currently running PowerSchool SIS. We've got the Granny Wood HR system, which is kind of a custom-built system they have. We use Active Directory, Google Apps, Office 365. Canvas is kind of the new thing this year. Pearson EasyBridge, which is one of our first integrations with some kind of automation. And then there's several of these other systems I'm sure some of you use. Clever, Blackboard Connect, Securely, Qualtrics.
So brief overview, as is probably true of most of the people in this room, we use all sorts of things. And almost all of them have a user account login at some level. And when we started looking, so basically the way our structure was set up, users at the baseline level, the initial user account was created through, and this is probably familiar to a lot of you, late in the summer when we felt pretty confident that we had most kids enrolled in our SIS. We'd do an export from our SIS, and we'd get a giant CSV file, which was undoubtedly full of errors that we'd have to correct. And we'd have this huge CSV file, and then we'd import that into Active Directory. And then our Active Directory would sync to Google and sync to Office 365, and we would, be all happy and ready to go. That's what we were doing for students. For staff, our setup was actually far worse. Again, 2,600 staff members. Our department administrative assistant would pore over the board hires and resignations notes from our board meetings and try to compare that with people and their group assignments and whether they had an account and that sort of thing. There were 1,000 problems with this system. It took a ton of her time. The chance that we were going to disable the account of somebody who resigned a coaching position but happened to still be a teacher was pretty darn high. The chance that we'd be creating a duplicate account for somebody who was already a sub in the district and is now hired as a full-time teacher was pretty high. So we're creating all sorts of inefficiency there, and that was due to the fact that we had manual creation. Going along with that, we were reliant upon reports from the field. I had mentioned that at the end of the summer, toward the end of the summer, when we felt pretty confident we wanted to do it early enough, we'd do an export from PowerSchool in our case. The reality for us, and I'm sure it's the reality for a lot of you, is that we have students who register for classes right up until the day classes start and after that. During the first month of the year, we might have hundreds of student changes, new students who come, students who go, that sort of thing. And we were basically completely reliant upon reports from the field. A teacher who would contact us and say, hey, I have so-and-so student, they've been in the district for a week, but they don't think they have an account login, and no one's ever gotten them one. And we didn't know this student existed because it hadn't been reported by a registrar, that fell through the cracks, whatever the case may be. Other teachers saw that they couldn't get access to digital materials, but just assumed there was a problem and someone else had reported it and it was being worked on. But we were reliant upon those reports, same for staff. As I just alluded to, we had a ton of points of failure. I don't know how many accounts we created where a teacher would report a student who didn't have an account yet. We would create it, and then we'd discover that the teacher misspelled the student's last name. And then we have to fix that, and so on and so forth. I mean, all of these are probably familiar things to many of the people in this room. And ultimately, my biggest issue with it is it's fundamentally reactive. We gave ourselves no opportunity, and this relates to lost seat time. We gave ourselves no opportunity to have digital resources ready for a student who's coming in mid-year or registered late in the summer. No opportunity to have things ready when they first sit down in the classroom. We were giving ourselves no opportunity to have digital resources ready for staff. As soon as they switch a position, they're in the correct group, or as soon as they come into the district, if they're coming at a time when we're not processing a ton of those. Related issues, inundation at the start of the year. I had a session earlier today. I talked about how our support ticket numbers like triple. It's probably even more than that. It's probably like a 6-fold increase for the first 3 weeks of the year, and then they still are super high basically until ITech every year. And this only compounded that because we see far more students coming and going right at the start of the year, and far more staff coming and going as we respond to staffing changes and enrollment expectations that were different right at the start of the year. Students forgetting passwords and having to reset those. Now that we're using Chrome OS, they often don't have the ability to go in, within Windows, you could do Control-Delete, change password. Now a lot of our students didn't have that ability. Forgotten passwords, we didn't have a delegation tool, so all of that came back to our IT help desk. So tons of time there, ultimately staff time. And for us, I would quantify this in hundreds of hours that we were devoting to these issues, supporting these issues, reacting to these issues.
So I'll talk a little bit about our solution. One of the main things that we were looking for is it kind of needed to be agnostic. We didn't want to be tied to, well, we have to have this that'll just work with PowerSchool, because we didn't really know what our authoritative data source was going to be. And we looked at a ton of sources. We looked at ASOP. We looked at our payroll system, which inexplicably had a different system than the HR system. We looked at everything. The only thing we knew for sure was PowerSchool had to do the student data because that was the only thing we had to have that. We ultimately chose the HR system. all UMRA needs is a CSV file. So PowerSchool can obviously do that. The HR system, with a little bit of tweaks, we were able to get that. Kind of our process, the very first thing after we picked our data sources was what groups do we want to keep? We had a ton of legacy groups, weird groups that people had created over the years in our AD. And then knowing that we didn't have to carry those along anymore, we decided, okay, which groups do we want to automate? Which groups do we want to have manual additions? So basically what we ended up doing was we created all the student groups that were automated. We made a building group, a grad year group, and as students age up in the PowerSchool system, that gets automatically updated. For staff, they all get stuck into a building group and a teacher or a staff group, like a certified classified system kind of thing. The next step after picking groups is we had to tie our authoritative data to our existing accounts. And that probably took the longest time. Because it was at that time when we realized, hey, we had a duplicate account problem with the previous system that we had. It was actually called FIM, that had created all kinds of bogus accounts. People would change names, people would put in nicknames into their PowerSchool, into the import. There was all kinds of legacy problems. Once we had all those accounts linked, and that process probably took us maybe a month and a half. We just wanted to make sure that we weren't going to eliminate accounts that students were using or staff that we didn't know about. So ultimately, we ended up pushing a lot of the work, the cleanup work, to the very end, to a point where we could see which accounts were being actively used and then consolidate them back. In some cases, we had 3 or 4 accounts per kid or staff, depending on the situation. So once we had our process map, kind of everything planned out, we had our data set, we had our group set, we had linked everything, then our final step was to create a process for inputting new students, new staff. And the way that we do that is multiple exports, multiple times a day, and UMRA basically scans those files, looking for any changes. It compares the AD structure, it compares the Google structure, and if there's anything missing or needs to change, it makes those changes. Like I said, we're still doing data cleanup, even though we're 8, 9, 10 months past implementation. We still have legacy problems we're cleaning up. It's a lot of work when you've had problems that you didn't know for years. One of the great things about the UMRA solution that we chose is the features. They were more than happy to build any kind of features we requested, which was excellent. The big thing is skips. So when you're in a school district, almost everybody has some kind of exception. They need to be in a coaching group. They need to be in this building group, even though they're not in that building group. The skips allow us to take users out of Google automation, Active Directory automation, Office 365 automation, any combination of those. So it kind of gives you the flexibility to have those manual changes when you need them. The big thing, and Adam talked about this, password resets. We were able to implement a pretty slick reset tool. The UMRA people, they did a custom creation of this tool so that it would work faster. Rather than actually querying the database, it would create a cached copy to make the changes for the passwords. So we ended up farming out all of those individual building password changes among the buildings themselves. So not only are they faster at responding, our help desk no longer gets inundated with all those tickets right at the start of the year. I've kind of already talked about some of these legacy automation problems. We're still picking up the pieces. The biggest thing is retraining the staff on data entry procedures. What we're trying to work on now is cleaning up our authoritative data sources, making sure that when kids go into PowerSchool, did you check if they already have an account? Are you making a duplicate account in there? Because if secretary staff do make a second student account, it will create another user account. And then it kind of puts us in that problem, which one's the real one? So that's kind of where we're at now. We're trying to retrain, make sure that we have like a process list so that when people that are entering data, they're not doing it in an erroneous way with weird characters. It's all consistent, and they're checking for duplicates before they go into the system.
One thing I want to jump in real quick, and Justin had alluded to this, but kind of going back to the beginning of this process, why we selected UMRA. So UMRA is a tool, it's by a company called Tools Forever, which by the way is the worst name I've ever heard for a company that wants to be taken legitimately, but they seem good. So don't be scared away by the name. But that said, we chose UMRA. There are a number of tools out there, and there are probably tools that are more appropriate than this one for a lot of your contexts. Our big criteria, and this is what Justin alluded to, we needed something that could rely upon multiple authoritative data sources. For some districts, you could use your SIS as your one singular authoritative data source for students and staff. District I was in prior to Iowa City, we could have done that. We had all of our staff in Infinite Campus. They were all there, you know, all students, all staff were in that one source. In Iowa City, we didn't have that luxury. We really didn't have staff without wholesale changes in terms of business process. We weren't going to be using that for an authoritative staff source. So without trying to do two separate automation systems, we couldn't rely on those systems that were exclusive to PowerSchool, for instance, of which there are many. We couldn't rely on certain tools that could only link from certain services to others. So we had to have something that was data source agnostic. And then the other one, we're going to get into this in the next slide, is we needed something that could also automate account creation in multiple diverse systems. So we've talked a lot about AD, but UMRA is actually directly handling our AD account creation. It's handling our Google account creation. And we'll talk in the next page about a few other systems that it's handling. So we wanted something that could both take multiple authoritative data sources and output to multiple places. And that's somewhere UMRA really shines, because they will build a connector to basically any system that you have access to do bulk account creations in any form. So that was a key criteria for us.
So here's a couple of the other integrations that we were just discussing. Our very first one was Pearson EasyBridge, which actually is a ODBC direct connection from PowerSchool straight to them. That replaced a Pearson map product they had that we'd been just uploading CSV files for years and years to create accounts. It was kind of the wild, wild west. We ended up scrapping all the old accounts and just starting fresh. Canvas is a big one. So Canvas, we actually tie in two systems. SSO is done through Google, but it also pulls all the student and scheduling data from PowerSchool. Inside of Canvas, it's also linked to Discovery Education, turn it in, and then Cengage find links. Clever, of course, I know a lot of you guys use Clever. Right now, we've only used Clever for Big Ideas Math and Cooter, and of course, Clever pulls direct from PowerSchool exports. Mackinvia, we have that set up to use Google SSO, and then securely, we're just now in the process of setting that up to do the parent file that it requires to have all the students be able to have their activity tracked by their parents.
Any questions at this point? Before we keep going. Cool.
What tools did you look at?
We looked at a number of them. There's one called, I believe, I always confuse this with the Google Read and Write product, but I think it's called Read Write Digital. If you do a search for SIS Google automation or something like that, it'll be the first thing that pops up. That was a powerful one, but it was limited to connections from SISs. So for our HR purposes, it wasn't going to work. We looked at a few others that were kind of sketchy, mostly in the form of, scripts that we found on GitHub repositories and things like that. But again, all of them had the limitation that they weren't able to do both sides, both to push into multiple places and to grab from multiple sources. So we looked all around, but UMRA was the only solution we found. It's not to say there aren't others out there, but it was the only one we found that could do what we wanted it to do. So moving forward, we are not where we want to be. Ultimately, we want to be in a place where, other than the exceptions that Justin mentioned, and there will always be some of those, there's certain information that simply does not exist within our authoritative data sources and never will exist within our authoritative data sources that's required to get people in the right groups, the right access levels, required to get people on the right distribution lists. There's always going to be a teacher who, needs to be in the distribution list for a building they're not in because they kind of consult and help in that building. So there will always be those exceptions, but other than those exceptions, our goal, and we're pretty darn close at this point, is to have everything else automated. We're not manually creating any accounts. We're not manually editing any accounts. Everything is coming from these two authoritative data sources. That's our goal, and we're pretty close to that. As we move forward, there are a couple of things that we're still working on. One of them, and I know that this is probably an issue that you'll face if you go down this route or if you already have. And this could be true both on the student information system side and in this specific case, HR. We've had to really work with our HR staff for that to be an authoritative data source that's accurate and timely. Particularly at the beginning of the year, one of the things we had to implement this year, and Justin implemented it, was actually to turn off automation, not for staff accounts, but for staff group assignments right at the start of the year, because our HR department was overwhelmed. We're a rapidly growing district. We had a lot of staff every year, and they simply couldn't keep up with entry into that system using the process that they were using. And so we had this situation where we were getting communications from teachers saying, hey, I was reassigned from Man Elementary to Southeast Junior High, and I'm still getting Man Elementary emails, and I'm not getting Southeast Junior High emails. We looked, they were in the wrong group. If you moved them manually, though, it would just get overwritten, and that was creating a problem for us. And there was no systematic way for us, because we didn't know which teachers had moved necessarily, no systematic way for us to skip those. So what we did is we temporarily, for a 2-week window, we disabled the group account sync, which gave HR, that was our agreed upon time frame, gave them time to catch up in their system, then we turned it back on, and it was all fine. Nothing changed when we turned it back on because HR had gotten their system corrected and everyone was in the right place. But going forward, one of the processes, and we've done this with a lot of things with them, we've had more conversations with HR than we ever thought we might. But one of the things that we've done is tried to provide resources and tried to help them out. So we tried to help out with their processes so that when we face this next year, they've made some tweaks that they're comfortable with that should allow them to process these changes in time so that we don't have to do this on a yearly basis. So that's kind of been our approach, is these are our authoritatives, and then let's deal with business process issues from the business process perspective and really try to get those cleaned up so that we don't have duplicate entry, we don't have exceptions. Another big one, and this I'm sure affects everybody in this room to some extent, is curricular material selections. A new math textbook is purchased that has an online component, and oops, it needs logins, and now suddenly we're into their management system and trying to upload CSV files, and who's going to manage that? Is it going to be teachers? Is it going to be someone in the building? Is it going to be someone at the district level? Is it going to be an SIS coordinator? Who knows? And that's something we really face when we're trying to rein in. And so one of the things that we're doing is being proactive about getting someone from our department directly involved with discussions about curricular materials. Now, I don't mean to imply that this would be a top priority. The top priority is choosing the best instructional materials. That said, we can provide them with frameworks where even if we're not physically present in the room, they understand that they need to ask whether something offers Google SSO integration, whether something offers Active Directory integration, and if it does, they can use that as part of their evaluation framework, and they're aware of that. So working with them to build that knowledge base has been key. Another real key for us, again, is the presence of UMRA, which gives us a fallback in the case where they have to identify curricular resources that don't support those integrations. We don't like to use UMRA more than we have to, because it takes time and it takes work to get those connectors built, and they build them, but it's still a lot of back and forth to get that figured out. But at least we have the option. So at least when we adopt curriculum, we're not put into a situation where, oh, we have this great automated system, but now suddenly we're going to have to do these things manually. So that's a nice benefit. Same deal on the business system side. One of the things that we're working on right now is using enterprise resource planning software, ERP. Enterprise Resource Planning, is that what it is? I can't remember what the acronym is. But anyway, updating our business software to try to consolidate systems. And One of the things, again, just like the curricular areas, we've really reinforced with people who are directors of business departments, who are operating the business side of things, is to A, bring us into the conversation so that we can give input, and B, really look for things that are already going to offer this integration. You know, every single one of our business department and payroll and HR admin assistants knows what Active Directory is, because they've been in enough meetings with me where I've brought up Active Directory as something that we really need to ask about, and we need to make sure that we have that connection. So again, part of it is the tools, building the framework to do the automation, but then maintaining that and maintaining a seamless environment that's actually going to reduce our workload going forward, improve accuracy going forward, you know, really involves communication with business, with curriculum and instruction, that sort of thing, and that's something we've really found. So at this point, and feel free to post these through Pear Deck if you like, but any questions or suggestions? One of the things that I would throw out is, are there products that people have used for this kind of thing that we haven't talked about? You know, what I don't want this to be is an UMRA sales session. What I want it to be is, here's what we did and what best fit our context, but I'm sure others have, you know, things that you've tried or goals that you have. So any comments, questions, tools you want to make sure the group is aware of?
I'm looking for something that would let me take Google Groups and reverse that into Active Directory.
So something that would take Google Groups and send that to Active Directory. So
For us, for instance, our HR people create our Active Directory accounts. We just created a web portal with it as part of their onboarding process. They create the staff accounts.
Yep.
So that everyone's kind of gets dumped into a staff OU, and we don't have a good sense of. And they put them in the initial building, but as you know, the years go by, they move buildings, just like we talked about.
Yep.
We delegated like our mailing lists on Google are just mailing lists, and we delegated that to the building secretaries to keep them up to date.
Sure.
So the Google groups are up to date as far as who's in what building, because the secretaries make sure of that. None of that comes back to us. So our Active Directory groups are where they were initially, and then never change again.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like somebody to get those Google groups and update my Active Directory groups.
That's an interesting challenge. So the question is basically, is there a way, so groups are maintained within the Google ecosystem. They do not match the Active Directory groups, but you want them to, and you want that synchronization to go directionally from Google to Active Directory.
I'm thinking GAM's going to have to be able to do that, but I don't know beyond that.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I thought. You could do a GAM export.
And then
Some kind of
it's kind
system like
of to be a
Umbrella.
PowerShell script then that takes the GAM export and
Yeah, and that would be the key is, you know, once you do the export from there are all sorts of ways, and you could script it on your own. Certainly there are solutions. It would be total overkill for that application, but that's something like UMRA could do. You know, but that would be the step. It's always, you know, everyone in this room knows it, but I feel like I'm standing in front of a camera, so I have to say it. If you're doing anything with scripting and PowerShell to modify Active Directory, make sure you test it thoroughly before you implement it in production. Everyone already knows this, I just wanted to say it. Other thoughts, yeah?
We use UMRA, so we do a sales pitch there. It works well. It's a lengthy process, so it's tedious. A few questions. You have door access?
Sorry, what was that?
Door access, do you have door access like S2?
We do. We do have door access systems. They're actually managed through our physical plant. We don't have any involvement with that.
Yeah, actually, there's not even security groups that we would manage.
Yeah, they do that all on their end.
So no tie-in with automation?
No, there should be, you know, when we look at overall business process, but there isn't right now.
And then you mentioned password management at the building level. Was it customized by UMRA?
They offer like a canned product, and we had them modify it. We had so many users when we try to populate that database, it would just take, it would query that AD for minutes, seconds even. You know, when you got 20 kids, you don't want to wait 5 seconds per reset. So they customized it to make it faster to cache it. But yes, they do offer just a canned password reset
So
tool.
a teacher librarian can change a password for a student?
Yep,
Correct.
and you can even limit it to this teacher group can only reset this building.
And UMRA does offer the ability to have, first of all, we could make that available to anybody. The teacher of librarian limitation is just ours.
Yeah.
But you can also make that available to students for a self-service password reset. The one caveat there is you have to bring in from your authoritative data source, so it'd have to be a PowerSchool field or something. I believe you'd have to bring in a secret key or some authenticator, just, you know, like you see with password resets on a lot of other sites, but for the student portal, it involves a little bit more.
Yep. And on your staff account creation, you base that on the start date or hire date?
Whenever they put it in the HR is when they get paid. Because
Well, the
we
reason I
fit-
ask is you'll have employees get hired in May, they want to attend professional development in June,
Yep.
but they don't start until August.
Yep,
Their account's
so-
not created.
So our system just grabs whatever HR's input. HR usually doesn't get around to inputting accounts in our district until shortly before they start, usually days before their start date. That said, we've had exactly that situation, and what we've done on our end is usually to get a hold of HR and say, hey, could you get this person into the system? They get them in and then they're created. So for us, it's whenever HR puts them in, rather than trying to adhere to a start date. We didn't want to do start date for that exact reason, though. I mean, even simple things like orientations and whatnot are often before the official start date listed in the system. Other questions or thoughts? Other systems? As I mentioned, and as Justin reinforced, this took a ton of time. We are more than happy to help provide assistance, give demos to anyone who wants it. We're more than happy to provide that. And also to provide some of our, the things that we learned along the way that might save you time in an implementation going forward. That's certainly something we want to do. If you have any other questions or anything like that, certainly feel free to reach out. It did take us a ton of time, but long term, I mean, this year alone, like I said, it will save literally hundreds of hours in terms of support time dealing with the issues that we outlined right at the start. But otherwise, hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for coming.
I mean,